Many years ago, in the beautiful city of Jos, lived a woman named Nanret Pam. Before the women at Farigada Market started to sing her age like a song, Nanret was just a bright girl who loved the cold Jos mornings and the smell of roasted corn near terminus. She told anyone who asked that she would build a family life full of peace. But 45 years later, people stopped greeting her by her name and started greeting her by her age, such that whenever she walked past, someone would say, "Good afternoon, Miss 45," and another would add, "She's still very single as a Pringle." The children also greeted her the same way because children copied whatever they hear. Her mother, Magna Pam, believed that marriage was a holy assignment, and so she would storm into Nanret's tailor shop with a head tie ready for battle. She would say things like, "My daughter, a woman cannot be an unused refrigerator for life. At some point, somebody must open the door and remove joy." Nanret would roll her eyes and say, "Mama, if joy is kept in a refrigerator, then it will be cold. And you know I like cold love." Her mother would sigh and announce to anyone listening that she had suffered in this world. And then she would drag Nanret to one mountain prayer meeting where a very serious usher would tell them to kneel on rocks and the wind would slap everybody's faces. The prayer leader would shout, "Every delay in this family break," and Nanret would say amen because she was well brought up. But immediately they come down from the hill, she would complain to her mother, "If God wants to deliver me, he knows my address in Rayfield. The angels can knock. They don't need to chase me across stones." Her sister Rhoda made things even worse with love that felt like pepper. Rhoda would burst into Nanret's house with 4 children and a bag of advice. "Big sis, your problem is simple. You do not reply messages fast, and men don't like that. Also, you laugh too much when you are nervous, and your laughter is too loud." Nanret would stare at her and say, "I am not a generator. My laughter does not need a soundproof cage." However, her friend Mimido was the only person who could seize her without drawing blood. She would sit on her shop table, swinging her legs and say, "Miss 45, if you do not marry soon, I will print t-shirts and start a campaign for eligible men." And Nanret would laugh and say, "Print the t-shirts, but make sure the sleeves are long so that the members don't snatch the husband before he gets to me." One particular morning, Nanret was in her shop when Madam Kangiag, her neighbor who managed all gossip within a 1-kilometer radius, came to her shop to drop off gist. "Good afternoon, Miss 45. I heard a new tenant is coming from Abuja. He is a fine gentleman with a billionaire bed. I hope you welcome him as a neighbor should." Nanret smiled and answered, "I always welcome new people to the compound. I even give them water." However, Madam Kangiang wasn't satisfied with the reply she got, so she tried again. "This one is a serious man. I heard he looks like he can carry a woman's destiny with one hand." Nanret nodded. "That sounds heavy. Let him carry his own first." Madam Kangiang hissed and walked away because Nanret was dulling her gossip vibe. Just then, Mimido leaned into the doorway and teased, "Prepare yourself, oh. This one a fine gentleman is coming. Ladies won't let him be. They will soon turn your veranda into a romantic movie set." Nanret rolled her eyes and said, "If they bring film, I'll bring popcorn to watch." Finally, that evening, the new neighbor arrived. His name was Dachung Gyang. He greeted the compound cheerfully, and when he got to Nanret's door, he said, "Good evening. I hope you don't mind showing me where the water tap is." Nanret showed him the tap. She showed him the corner to keep his buckets and even the shortcut to the main road. He thanked her, but as she turned to go, Nanret's mother appeared from nowhere, studied him like a document, and then she asked, "Young man, are you married?" He blinked and laughed. "No, ma." She asked again, "How old are you?" And he said, 47. Magna turned to her daughter triumphantly and exclaimed loudly, "He is older." This is very scriptural. But Nanret covered her face and begged the ground to swallow her, while Dachung, who had manners, pretended not to hear. Later that night, Megida, the compound guard, knocked and announced there will be a short meeting tomorrow because the well needs repair. But before he left, he added, "Welcome to Dachung," and Madam Kangyang smiled mischievously and added, "Welcome to romance." The other women laughed, but Nanret excused herself and went inside. Exactly 2 weeks after Dachung moved in, Rhoda arrived with a small ambush disguised as breakfast. She came very early with a bowl of masa. She placed the bowl on the table, faked an innocent face and said, "I brought food and one small suggestion. Today, I want us to end this matter once and for all." And before Nanret could escape, 2 men were already sitting in her parlor. The first was Mr. Pamsin Dong, a businessman with a ring that flashed like a traffic warning. And the second one was Ezekiel Choji, a retired civil servant who liked to speak as if every sentence had a stamp on it. Pamsin cleared his throat and began without permission. "Madam Nanret, time is a very slippery thing. If we delay too long, it will fall into a gutter. So I am here to save time. You are 45 and I am generous. So let us help each other before the window closes." The room fell silent in shock, and Mimido, who had just entered, almost choked on her laughter. Nanret raised one eyebrow and asked in a very innocent voice, "Sir, are you proposing or are you advertising an umbrella?" Pamsin blinked. "I am only being realistic." Nanret smiled and replied, "Realism should wear clothes. Yours came too naked." Just then, Rhoda pinched her arm. "Be polite, Nanret." Ezekiel adjusted his glass and decided to present himself like a retirement benefit. "Madam Nanret, I am a simple man. I have pension. I have land somewhere near Bukuru and I need company. In fact, I will not disturb you. You can do your sewing, but just don't disturb me with the noise while I sit and read my newspaper." Nanret nodded thoughtfully and asked, "Sir, who will disturb who first, your snoring or my machine?" But Ezekiel smiled proudly and said, "I don't snore. I only breathe with a message." Mimido laughed so loudly that even the curtains shook. Well, just when Nanret thought the parade was over, Magna walked in and announced that one final guest was still coming. Before they could say what, Brother Bulus, a zealous worship leader who carried a Bible like a trumpet, entered. He sat solemnly and said, "Sister, the problem with you is lipstick. If you remove this worldly ornament, you will be found by destiny." Nanret placed her palm on her chest and shook her head. "My goodness, so that is why the earth rotates. It definitely can't stay in one place." Rhoda nudged her. "Sister, behave now." But Nanret shrugged. "I am behaving more than my blood pressure." Oh. In the middle of all this, Mr. Dachung knocked with a small toolbox in his hand and said from the doorway, "I noticed your back door has a loose hinge, so I came to help you fix it before it pulls off completely." The whole room went quiet because a man who fixes things without being asked is a miracle in every language. He greeted everyone politely. Magna leaned towards Rhoda and exclaimed, "Do you see what I see?" Rhoda nodded excitedly. "I see a hinge and a future." Mimido placed both hands on her cheeks and nudged Nanret. "Say thank you now." Nanret, who was now both amused and embarrassed, stood up and said, "Mr. Dachung, thank you for your thoughtfulness." He smiled and went off to work. Pamsin watched this exchange with the face of a man who just swallowed a lemon but decided to recover his pride quickly. He stood up, cleared his throat again and announced, "I am a man of resources. If you accept me today, I will pay your shop rent for 5 years." And Magna looked excited while Rhoda clapped softly. But Nanret held up her hand and said kindly, "Sir, I am not a project, I am a person. If you wish to bless a woman, let her be your wife. If you wish to marry me, speak to my heart, not to my rent." Ezekiel nodded as if she had quoted the Constitution, while Bulus shook his head like a disappointed trumpet. When the men finally left, Magna paced the parlor and threw her hands in the air. "My daughter, why do you reject every help the Lord sends? You will be the end of me one day." Nanret sighed and said, "I don't want to be the end of you, Mama. I just want to be the beginning of me." And Magna, who loved her first child, even when the girl drove her to prayer at odd hours, embraced her and said, "You will not carry life alone. I am here for you." That evening, Dajung finished with the hinge and tested the door twice to be sure. When Naret saw it, she was impressed and told him thank you. Dajung nodded and said, if you need help carrying fabric from the market, I can give you a ride sometimes. But before she could answer, Madam Kangyang materialized beside the window and declared to the lizards, service is now flowing in this compound. That night, Rhoda returned to Nanret's house and pretended to look for something. But then, she sat on the bed and asked, do you like him? Nanret was taken aback by the question, but after a long pause, she said, I like that he is gentle. I like that he fixes things. I like that he did not flinch when Mama asked about marriage. But I am afraid of hoping too much and too fast. Rhoda smiled and said, hope can walk slowly if you tell it to. One morning, Nanret sat in her shop sewing a green ashebi blouse for a client, but her mind was far from the fabric because for 2 weeks now, Mr. Dachung, the new neighbor from Abuja, had been doing small things that unsettled her heart, like greeting her every morning with a dramatic smile, offering to lift her fabric bundles whenever he saw her at the market, helping her move her heavy tailoring table without being asked, and the day he came to her shop, he helped her fix the loose socket when he noticed it sparked. However, he never said much or acted forward, but there was something about his presence that was calm, steady and kind. It reminded her of a song she used to love as a teenager, but had forgotten the lyrics too. Of course, her friend Mimido noticed before anyone else. One afternoon, she barged into Nanret's shop unannounced. Nanret Pam, explain why I saw you this morning laughing with Abuja bread under the mango tree. You that claim that men makes you tired. I was shocked to see you shining and laughing like sunlight on a Monday morning. Nanret raised an eyebrow without looking up from her stitching. Mimido, I laugh every day. The Lord gave me teeth to air them out. Should I send him a message to recall the gifts? Mimido dragged a stool, sat down and crossed her legs dramatically. This laughter was different. This one carried meaning. It is the kind that travels from the stomach, climbs into the chest, then settles in the eyes. Ah, Miss 45, are you falling or have you fallen? Nanret dropped her scissors down slowly and turned to her friend. Mimido, if you came to count my smiles, I will start billing you 500 naira per analysis. Mimido ignored the threats and leaned closer like a market gossip queen. You know Madam Kangyang has already printed headlines, right? She told the women at the borehole that Abuja has entered Miss 45's blood. She even said, you have started practicing honeymoon laughter. Nanret burst into laughter. Honeymoon laughter, Mimido. Honestly, they should open a small radio station for that woman and pay her. Her talent is wasting. Unfortunately, while she joked, the rumors were spreading at the yam section in Faringada markets. 2 women pretended to argue over tomato prices, but they were really discussing her. At church, the choir mistress leaned over during practice and muttered, Sister Nanret's aura is glowing these days. And someone replied very quickly, love is a very moisturizing thing. Even her mother, Magna Pam, started behaving strangely. She called one evening, speaking in a sweet tone that made Nanret immediately become suspicious. Daughter of my womb, how are you this fine evening? Nanret squinted at the phone. Mama, why are you greeting me as if you want to sell me a piece of land? Magna ignored her and went straight to the point. I heard Brother Dachung is from a good family and he greets people very well. Does he eat tuwon acha? We must know these things early. I am planning to visit him and greet him properly. Nanret nearly dropped the phone. Mama, I beg. Sorry, please. Don't embarrass me now. Don't carry kola nuts and our family history to his door. We are neighbors, nothing more. Magna sighed dramatically. If I leave you this girl, you will turn this opportunity into exercise. 45 years, Nanret. Do you want to grow wings and join the angels before tasting marriage? Before Nanret could respond, a knock came at the door, and when she opened, Mr. Dachung himself stood there carrying a small basket of fresh strawberries. I saw this on my way back. I thought you might like them, so I got you some. Before she could thank him, Magna, who was still on the phone, yelled, Is that his voice I hear? Put him on the line immediately. Nanret ended the call and muttered, This is why the Lord hides blessings from some families, because we cannot just keep quiet. That same evening, Naret found herself sitting on the veranda with Dachung. Sipping kunu silently, they spoke about everything: the wicked electricity, the unpredictable weather, and the price of onions at the market. His voice was calm, and for the first time in years, Naret felt like someone was speaking to her without measuring her age or mocking her title. But unfortunately, she didn't enjoy that peace for long, not when she had other envious suitors. One Sunday morning, she attended a singles focus service inside Hilltop Chapel, where Pastor Bulus, a man who believed his microphone was a personal trumpet, announced dramatically, "Today, the Spirit has located one stubborn sister who has refused to answer the call of destiny." Naret's heart skipped. Pastor Bulus paced the pulpit like a man chasing devils with a stick. He boomed into the microphone, "Sister Naret Palm, come forward." The congregation gasped in perfect unison, and somebody said loudly, "The prophecy has landed." Naret sat frozen for a second, then slowly she stood and walked down the aisle as people talked around her. 45 years and still miss? This deliverance must be strong. Let's see how she will run now. Pastor Bulus smiled piously and placed one hand on her shoulder. "Sister Naret, the Lord says delay is not denial. We must break the spirit of marital stagnation right here, right now." Naret leaned closer, smiled sweetly, and whispered into his ear, "Pastor, please, remember this is a church, not Netflix. Don't start a series you cannot finish." But Pastor Bulus, who was drunk on microphone power, raised his hand dramatically and declared, "Church, stretch your hands towards our sister. Say, marriage come by fire." Half the congregation shouted, while the other half hid their laughter behind their hymn books. As for Naret, she swallowed hard, turned around, and walked straight out of the church, leaving the pastor praying over empty air. By the time she reached the compound, the rumor had already grown wings. Pastor chased Miss 45 with holy water, but she escaped. Well, that was not all, because Pam Sindong, the arrogant businessman she rejected during the Suitor Summit, decided to retaliate. At the Monday market, he leaned on a stall full of sweet potatoes and announced loudly, "I pity Miss 45. She wanted me, but I refused her because my standard is high. Now she's chasing Abuja men to cover her prestige." The women clapped their hands dramatically, and one person shouted, "Pamsin, fear God." But most people laughed, and by that afternoon, it had reached the compound. That evening, Naret marched into the market, found Pamsin bragging in front of 5 men, and she said loudly enough for the Okada riders to hear, "Mr. Pamsin, thank you for rejecting me. If you had accepted, I would be trapped inside your trousers, ironing arrogance every day. God has indeed used you to set me free." The entire row of traders exploded into laughter. Pamsin's face folded like a crumpled shirt, and from that day, he stopped sharing testimony about rejecting her. When Mimido heard about what happened, she came to see Naret that night. "Naret Pam, did you really say that? This your mouth will not enter heaven directly. They will measure it at the gates." Naret scoffed and replied, "I am sure heaven has a special express lane for women who survived 45 years of singlehood." For weeks, Naret and Danjung enjoyed a very healthy friendship in spite of the side talks from neighbors, until the biggest story that shook the foundation of their relationship came. She was in her shop working on a clothes when Madam Kangyang, the undisputed minister of breaking news, stormed into her shop without knocking, breathing fast as if she had discovered oil in her backyard. "Naret Pam, so you want to disgrace us, ba?" Naret frowned and placed her zipper down carefully, because experience had taught her to never face gossiping people with sharp objects in her hand. "Madam Kangyang, good morning. Do you want to order a blouse or a coffin? Because the energy you are carrying looks like that of burial." "Forget greeting," Madam Kangyang hissed and folded her arms. "We just heard something from Abuja direct. Your dear Mr. Danchung The quiet one you've been smiling with in secret. They say he's engaged to one powerful woman there. Engagement, and their wedding is in 3 months. For a second, Nanret thought her ears were malfunctioning. So she laughed. I beg, sorry, please, Madam Kangyung, just go back to the source and collect correct information. Danjung talks to me every day. If he had a fiancé, I would know. But Madam Kangyang widened her eyes like someone about to deliver prophecy. No what? These Abuja men that can have 2 houses, 3 girlfriends and 4 secrets. We warned you, at 35 years you are still collecting heartbreak. This one will enter syllabus. Before Nanret could respond, Mimido appeared like the angel of drama, carrying puff-puff and frowning suspiciously. What is going on? Madam Kangyang turned to her with relish. Ask your friend. Her Abuja bird has a whole woman waiting in Maitama. Nanret here has been auditioning for second wife position unknowingly. Mimido gasped. Jesu Christi. Nanret, if this is true, I will personally organize a fasting program for your love life. Another heartbreak? Nanret ignored her, stood up calmly, dusted her hands and said in a voice that surprised even herself, gossip is free, but peace is expensive. Well, I chose the expensive one. Good day, Madam Kangyang. But her heart was already bleeding. That evening, she sat alone in the sitting room staring at the clouds through the window. Then, she heard a knock on her door. She opened it and there he was, Mr. Dachung, looking tired but smiling. Nanret, are you free to talk? She folded her arms and leaned against the doorway. Are you engaged, Mr. Dachung? His smile faded and he hesitated for a moment before answering. I was, but I am not anymore. Nanret's brow furrowed. You were? And you didn't think it was important to mention it to me? Danjung sighed deeply and then he sat on the small bench there. It ended 3 months ago. I caught her with someone else. That was why I left Abuja, but only to start over, not to play games. I wanted to tell you when I was ready, but this, he gestured towards the compound. This place doesn't even allow private conversations. Nanret stared at him for a long moment and her heart softened despite her pride. However, before she could reply, Rhoda, her dramatic younger sister, burst into the veranda urgently and exclaimed breathlessly, Sister, Mama sent me. She said I should tell you that Pastor Bulus heard the rumor and he is preparing an emergency prayer meeting for your healing. Nanret pressed her fingers against her temple and muttered, Lord, if I survive this family, I deserve a compensation. Dachung coughed slightly. I can leave if I'm bringing trouble. But Nanret turned to him and said, Dachung, trouble has been living here before you came. You are just paying rent for it now. For the first time that day, she laughed and he laughed too. Unfortunately, the laughter did not last long because Pamsin Dong, the rejected suitor with a grudge, was still alive and roaming. One Saturday morning, the landlord called for a compound meeting. The topic was water contribution, but somehow it turned into an open forum about Nanret's personal life because Pamsin Dong, the walking megaphone, a non-tenant and uninvited guest, staggered into the meeting like a lost sheep and announced, My fellow area tenants, this is coming from a concerned citizen. We must protect our compound from heartbreak spirits. Miss 45 has been carrying herself like the first wife material ever. Meanwhile, Abuja man came here and used her to rehearse engagement number 2. The crowd started murmuring. Madam Kangyang held her chest dramatically. You would think they announced rent increments. Just then, Nanret stood, adjusted her blouse and stepped into the middle of the circle. Her voice was polite and not polite at the same time. Pamsin, thank you for your continued interest in my destiny, but I hereby release you from the burden of thinking about me every morning. You are now free to focus on your goats, your yam ban, and your unpaid debts. The compound exploded into laughter. Pamsin's mouth opened and closed like a faulty window, but before he could recover, Mr. Dachung rose from his chair and spoke for the first time. He pointed and looked around. For the record, I am not engaged and I am not rehearsing anybody's wedding. I came here to start a new life. And yes, she deserves respect and not gossip. The silence that followed after that speech was thick enough to cut with a tailor's scissors. Madam Kangyang swallowed slowly and her eyes darted between them. Finally, the landlord cleared his throat and declared, "If this meeting does not end now, we will find ourselves entering a wedding budget right here." By evening, the compound had transformed completely. If there was gossip before, now there was curiosity. And if there was mockery before, now there were polite smiles. Even Madam Kangyang herself passed Nanret's door without a side comment, which was the clearest sign of a miracle since the invention of electricity. 3 months later, during the grand opening of Nanret's expanded shop, which she renamed Palm Threads Fashion Academy, the entire community gathered. There was kunu, masa, meat pie and music playing from Mimido's carefully curated playlist. And then, to everyone's surprise, Mr. Dajung walked to the center of the shop and turned to Nanret. "Nanret Pam, you are not Miss 45. You are Nanret, a strong, brilliant and kind woman, full of light. If you let me, I would like to stand with you slowly and patiently, with no drama and no pressure." For a moment, everyone held their breath. Then, Mimido exclaimed loudly, "Say yes before Pam seemed faint in jealousy." Nanret smiled, looked at Dajung and said, "Yes, but let us walk, not run." The applause that followed rolled through the shop like a sudden thunder, and for the first time in many years, the title Miss 45 no longer belonged to Nanret. She had found something better than gossip or revenge. Thank you for watching the story. Kindly share your thoughts about the story with me in the comment section. Give the story a thumbs up and share the story out with your loved ones. Subscribe to this channel if you've not done so by now. Until I bring another story your way. Bye!